maybe consider going out and getting some professional photography done. But those photos will be pristine and you are able to reuse them. So the best time to take them, of course, I would suggest is once your unit has been vacated and you've touched up all the things, such as the paint, maybe got those floors replaced, whatever you've done to make sure that your place looks tip-top is the best time to go and get those photos taken. And this is definitely going to put your best foot forward, as well as let the tenant know that you actually care and you are being professional, even though that you're doing it yourself. Hello everyone, welcome to the show. This week I'm solo, so we'll be going through a couple of items such as your tech stack, as well as a high overview of rules that are surrounding being a landlord that some people have forgotten, as well as some of them have changed. So we've got a few calls this week from landlords asking questions about things that they were aware of before but are no longer, and so therefore they could get themselves into some trouble if they don't know what the current rules are surrounding that. So we'll be covering that after a couple of items that are our tech stack, basically, for being a landlord in 2025. So without further ado, the first one that I'd like to touch base on is this item here. This is an electrical tester, and it's great for when you're going through your unit and you want to make sure that the electrical works, but you don't want to be carrying a lamp around everywhere. So you can pick one of these up for about $50, $30, anywhere in that range at any hardware store. And basically the use of it is you just plug them into each outlet and you'll be able to know if that outlet is working properly, if there's any shorts, and it has different codes on it that will help you, in which case this way when your tenant moves in, you will have a better idea of what's going on in the unit and make sure that you can fix that, because obviously electricity is a big thing for any tenant. The next item that I wanted to cover is sort of a pre-tenant moving in item, which is to switch your light bulbs to LED light bulbs. The reason why you want to do this is it just looks better, saves people money, as well as the fact that they generally last a very, very long time. One of the often disputed things that happens when tenants move out is they don't replace the light bulbs that were used during the tenancy. So the next tenant comes in, there's dead light bulbs. Maybe the landlord didn't notice that, doesn't want to replace them, etc., etc. So a quick way to get ahead of that situation is just switch all of your light bulbs to the LED light bulbs. It'll save money, they'll last longer, and basically it'll just make everything run a lot smoother in the long run. Now, this brings us up to actually finding the tenants. So of course, everyone is using your various sources such as Craigslist, Kijiji, Live.Rent, Facebook Marketplace, and so on. However, I've noticed from when we're doing our comparable units to others out there to find the price that many people are not using an application. You're absolutely welcome to use an application as a landlord, and frankly, you should be. The reason for this is because this will help vet to have a stronger tenant. Now, things that you can ask on the application do apply with tenant rights, human rights, etc. So don't go asking things such as race, religion, etc., etc. But you can ask for things such as where they're working, where they're currently living, proof of identification, stuff like this, as well as ask for permission to do a credit check. I'm going to take this moment as well to talk about credit checks. Many times a landlord will think that the credit check is the end-all be-all, which is a little bit off. Granted, it can give you a better idea of who you're looking at as a tenant. However, rent is not tied to credit. So what this means is that you could have absolutely stellar credit and still not pay your rent on time, and vice versa. I personally think that these should be connected, so that way if a tenant is paying $3,000 a month in rent, that should be building their credit. Of course, on the flip side, if they're messing around, it should damage your credit. So unfortunately, that's above my pay grade, but needless to say, the credit check is not the end-all be-all of all of the ways to check in on a tenant. Now, going back to the application, with this, the way that it helps vet somebody is that when a tenant has an application and they fill it out, this is showing you that they are willing to share with you who they are and what they're doing. If any tenants, of course, decline to fill out an application, probably a good sign that that's a red flag. Feel free to move on to the next one who will fill out the application so that you know that you're not having a bad tenant, or at least a better idea of having a good one. Now, this being said, with the applications, one of the best sites to use is Wufoo. That's WUFOO.com. And there is free sites like that so that you can fill out an online application. Nobody has to print out anything since most people don't own a printer these days. And they'll be able to just fill that out and email it to you. This way, everything's written out nice and clean, and you're able to go and check to see what's going on with that tenant. After you have selected your tenant, of course, be sure to delete all the previous applications simply for the fact that if anyone got into there obviously would be a risk of having their identity stolen. So you want to make sure that everybody is protected. Another thing to help you in your tech stack as an owner is that you want to go and make sure that you put your best foot forward. So now we've touched base on where to market, such as Craigslist and so on. However, some of the photos that you see there have been taken with a vertical camera that looks like it might have been a potato. I'm not sure, but that being said, you want to put your best foot forward. So maybe consider going out and getting some professional photography done. All of the real estate channels usually use that, such as MLS and any professional realtor, as well as most property managers. Now with that, it'll probably cost you around $120 to $150 for this. But those photos will be pristine and you are able to reuse them. So the best time to take them, of course, I would suggest is once your unit has been vacated and you've touched up all the things, such as the paint, maybe got those floors replaced, whatever you've done to make sure that your place looks tip top is the best time to go and get those photos taken. Now with that as well, many of these local companies also can do virtual tours as well as floor plans. You might as well go ahead and get those done at the same time. Yes, it will cost a little bit more. However, again, you can reuse all of these. So the benefit of this is that you have your place captured in time in pristine look. And this is definitely going to put your best foot forward, as well as let the tenant know that you actually care and you are being professional, even though that you're doing it yourself. The other thing with this as well is since you're able to keep those virtual tours and photos and so on and so forth, when your tenant does finally give you notice, you're able to put it right back on the market immediately. So you don't have to worry about going in there, retaking photos, seeing if the tenant's okay with that, because a tenant is exactly in their right to decline taking photos because it is their stuff and it is their privacy that you are intruding on. So do take that into account. It's always a great idea to go get your own photos done or even try and do it yourself. One of the ways that you can do it yourself is if you take a video of it, you walk through the unit with your camera, but I would suggest to maybe look into getting a gimbal. What a gimbal does, of course, is will hold your phone in a more steady method so that it almost floats through the unit, almost like a drone would, if you will, instead of having it bouncing around, getting some Blair Witch Project type of going thing, which I might have just aged myself with Blair Witch, but that's beyond the point. One of the other things that you may want to consider adding to your tech stack as well is a digital move-in report. Now, there are a few apps that are out there, such as eTadley, Z-Inspector, and Happy Inspector, as well as Snap Inspector. We personally use Happy Inspector for my units in that because I am professionally with Office. So that one's a little bit more expensive, but it does have quite a few extra features. One of the ones I really would suggest to take a look at, though, is Z-Inspector. The reason why I suggest this one is they do have a free version, and it can hold up to 5 units for that free version. So if you have more than one investment property, this is a great way to keep track of them. The benefit with using an app for your move-in condition reports, which I'm assuming that you are taking, is that this takes a snapshot of what's going on in the unit at the time. And the nice part about this is it turns it into a nice PDF, one file, and it can be saved. The benefit of this as well is that the tenant, when they're moving in, they know they've been heard because they can point out something that's going on with the issue, see you take the photo, and then it's there on the PDF that they will sign and will be emailed to them. So this way, it's definitely been recorded, they're happy, and they feel safe. Of course, on the flip side of that, you're happy and you feel safe as well, because if there's suddenly a hole in the wall, it'll be very easy to prove that it came after the fact because the tenant was obviously with you when you did the move-in report, and therefore it came after. Any arbitrator with half their mind would probably ask immediately, if there was a hole in that wall, why didn't you ask them to take a photo of it? So I would suggest that you take a look at these apps. I will have links in the description below, of course, so that you can check them out and see which one's the best fit for you. But I really would recommend that you look into using an app for your move-in reports, especially because the paper ones that are provided by the government, they are fairly useful, of course, but let's face it, most of our handwriting is not tip-top these days, as well as the fact that things get lost, burnt, whatever happens, right? Things do happen, as well as photos just get deleted. Because, I mean, you'll have your phone, you'll get a new phone, and then you lose half your photos anyways. So make sure that you check out these apps. It will be very helpful. Which leads to storage. One of the things that people find during a tenancy, because people stick around for 3, 4, 5 years, is that things go missing. So when you need those photos and that move-in report that you did 3 years ago with your tenant, and now they're moving on, it might be tricky to find that. If you don't have that move-in report, you are not able to claim anything simply for the fact that there's no way to prove what it was in the first place. So make sure that you keep your stuff in a cloud storage. Some of the cloud storages that I would suggest are such as Dropbox, Sync, which is Canadian owned, and Google Drive, iCloud. Any of these offerings will be able to keep this in a separate place so that should anything happen in your home, that you still have all the documents, such as if there was a flood or a fire and your computer got wrecked, now those documents are gone if they were scanned. And of course, if they're paper, they're definitely gone. People lose papers all the time. So make sure that you use these 6 items that I've covered so that you can make sure that you are doing landlording properly and make sure that you are protected in every which way that you can. And this will also make for a nice smooth tenancy so that you can reissue anything that needs to happen, such as the photos, such as the move-in report, same with your contracts and such. So keep everything in a free cloud device. This way you won't be stuck behind. So now I just wanted to cover a couple of the things that are the high overview that some of our landlords have been missing, which it's kind of shocking almost at some points in time. So for instance, we'll cover in when a tenant moves in and signs a fixed term lease. Now back in the day, there was a terminating fixed term lease, in which case if a tenant signed from January 1st to December 31st, and there was not a new contract, that tenant had to leave. However, some landlords were trying to use this as a loophole to get around the maximum increase prescribed by the government at the time. So what they would do is say that they want suddenly $600 more per rent, and if the tenant didn't sign it, they had to go. So to counteract this, because people were taking advantage, is that the terminating lease is gone. So now, yes, you do find a fixed term lease. So that again would be from January 1st to December 31st. After that, however, it will switch to a month-to-month tenancy. The tenant does not need to sign anything more. It just automatically happens. So that means that you will still be able to prescribe your yearly rental increase, of course, but you can't go hop it up $600 if you at will. And there is no leverage to make any tenants sign that, which is a good thing to protect the tenants, of course. Now, that being said, there is benefit to re-signing a fixed term tenancy for both parties. Of course, the fixed term tenancy will work for the tenant because they know that they have 1 year or whatever the term is that they will be present at that property. If that property is sold, then that tenancy must move with the property. So example, if you signed your tenancy from January 1st to December 31st and sold your place in May, that tenant cannot be asked to leave. So that's also a benefit to you because you know that your tenant won't leave as well. However, the month-to-month tenancy, a tenant can be asked to leave if the new owner wants to move in. Which brings us to our next change that has happened. The new rules have been finally settled down so that if the tenant is on a month-to-month lease and you as an owner are going to move into the unit, you must give them 4 months of notice, and they are still entitled to 1 month of free rent or the equivalent to. If your unit is being sold, it is 3 months notice that the tenant must be given, and they are still entitled to 1 month of free rent or the equivalent of. The reason why we say the equivalent of is because 4 and 3 months respectively is quite some time. So if a tenant does find a new place to move to, they can give you notice and you will still owe them the equivalent of 1 month, which would be cash or the split thereof. An example of being a split thereof would be if they moved on May 15th, they would have used 15 days of free rent and you'll pay them the difference to the end of the month when they leave. These are a couple of the rules that have come in. There are many more, so if you'd like more information about that, please get a hold of us because there has been some changes that have happened to the Residential Tenancy Act along the rules to further protect tenants and to help landlords out. So do make sure that you are up to date so that you don't end up getting yourself in trouble and having a bad faith eviction, which could lead you owing up to 12 months worth of rent. Well, this has been a bit of a shorter one. I just wanted to go for a high overview of a couple of the rules as well as the tech stack. So if you have any questions, please feel free to get a hold of me. And if you've been listening for this long, I really appreciate you listening. This has been Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast.